Call this meeting to order. First order of business is disclosure of pecuniary interests. Mark, you have one?
Item B,
okay, so noted. And Chess? Okay, so noted. The minutes from May 5th, was there any errors or omissions? If not, I'll take a mover and seconder for the minutes. Mover. Lewis. It's been a long day, Scott. All in favor? Carried. Next, we have a drainage report. This is the Tate drain. So I need a mover and seconder. The engineer's report for the Tate drain branch G2 2021 is prepared by Spreets Associate London Limited, dated April 23rd, 2021, be accepted. And bylaw number, you don't do that yet.
No, go right.
Is it? That's a little premature. Mover and seconder. Engineer's report provided comments with respect to the engineer's report and outline the nature of the proposed work. So I assume Mike is there. Good evening,
Yes.
Mike.
Good evening. You can hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you good.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just do a brief overview. This is a reconvening of an existing or a current consideration meeting. We held one prior, but that we adjourned that meeting to meet with the owner, one of the petitioners in the field, to review a concern or a couple of concerns the landowner had. As a result of that meeting, there were no changes that we found required to the watershed. We did provide an alternative design to construct. There is a weir that's included. So just to give a brief overview, this report incorporates 2 private tiles. It incorporates a surface pipe underneath Sawmill Road, as well as reconstructs a short 23-meter stretch of channel and has a weir to mitigate the additional flows, as a fair amount of the watershed included to the tributary tiles is not naturally tributary to the original Tate drain. So we had to include a weir to try and mitigate the increased flows. We redesigned that to have a berm within the branch E channel and a smaller pipe, but we did not have any direction from the landowner or the petitioner to change the design that we had in the report that is before you still. So there are no changes that we know of that are required to this report. So I would stop and open up to questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Allison, was there any one has submitted any comments in writing concerning the drainage report?
Through your worship, I can report that no one has submitted any comments in writing.
Okay. Any questions from council? Is Mr. Donor there? I don't think he is, isn't he? So if Mr. Donor's not there, has he been notified that there is an option?
Yes, we did provide him the alternative, and we asked for a response a couple of times. I believe the municipality, their staff as well, your staff as well, had also asked for that, but we did not receive direction back to make any changes.
Okay, so he knows the next steps if he wants to appeal?
Maybe not, I don't know, but I'll quickly review that any landowner affected does have the right to appeal to the tribunal. That appeal typically is a window of 40 days after mailing of the provisional bylaw. So after tonight's meeting, if it is accepted, then the provisional bylaw will be mailed out to the landowners, and there's a 40-day window after that point in time, which a landowner can appeal directly to the tribunal by submitting that appeal to the municipality.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to you, Mike.
So, every profession is subject to errors in reports. I know in my field as a consultant, that's why we get errors and omissions insurance. But I put a lot of methods in place to mitigate errors. Like I use multiple data sources. I use peer reviews for my reports. So could you describe how that works in your world? Like how you build confidence in your recommendation report? Do you consult with the landowners and consider their knowledge of the property? Do you consult with peers? How does that work?
Yes, I'd say it's a combination of all those things. We do rely on information from the landowners as much as we can. We also complete our own field investigations, and within our office, we have 4 engineers that complete drainage reports under the Drainage Act as well. So we do cross-reference some of our own designs with other people internal in our office.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Seeing done. Mover and seconder. The engineer's report for the Tate Drain Branch E 2021 is prepared by Spreets Associate, London Limited, dated April 23rd, 2021, be accepted. And then bylaw number 22-39 being bylaw to provide for the Tate Drain Branch E 2021 drainage work be read a first and second time and provisionally adopted. Serna and Lewis, all in favor? Carried.
Your worship, I believe somebody has a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's Leon Passmore here. I don't know.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Leon.
I've got Peter Donor on the phone. He's unable to connect to the meeting because of the internet connection he has. So he does have apparently some questions, but he can't connect to the virtual meeting.
Certainly, can you pass on the question to Mike?
Sure. Do you have any questions, Peter, or? Okay. Peter, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on speakerphone to see whether or not the council can hear your comments here. Okay, try it now, Peter.
Okay. Our property, or my wife's property, is systematically tiled way before we put that 10-inch tile in. And those to the west of our property, away from the Tate drain. So my question is, how is it possible our field, our farm is part of the Tate drain now? Our farm cannot be in 2 different watersheds.
Leon, can you repeat that because it was breaking up?
Yeah, sorry. Basically, in general, what Peter is asking is that the farm was systematically tiled prior to the installation of this new drain, the 10-inch drain. And before that, the farm was not part of the Tate drain. So he's wondering why now it is included as part of the Tate drain.
Mike,
right?
can you respond?
Water going into the 10-inch tile. Everything goes to the southwest from our field.
Mike,
Tile connected to the 10-inch tile.
Sorry, Dave.
I can respond to that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes. The 10-inch tile, as far as I'm aware, was installed and would have tiles connected to it. That is the reason, as far as I'm aware, for the installation of the tile. There was no mention made of tiles heading off to the southwest. The surface water itself that lands in the field will flow southwest and leave the property going through the Jones property. There is a catch basin at the line fence where it does capture some of the surface water, but all of the tiling and the water that gets into that pipe would come down into the Tate drain. So Mr. Donor does have to be charged into the Tate drain, and he is correct that some water will still continue to the southwest. So having some water going in one direction and some water going another direction does not alleviate the necessity for having a drain. We did indicate to the landowner that he could remove the tile and have all of the water go to the southwest. That was his option, that he does not have to have water coming over into the Tate drain. He chose to do that by installing a tile in that direction. So he is being assessed for the water that uses that tile.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Leon, has he got any more questions?
Any more questions, Peter?
I didn't get the whole story here. What was Mike saying?
I'm not sure how well this is working out here. I'm sorry, Mike, could you please repeat that? Peter didn't quite catch everything.
Like I said, we did not receive any information prior to tonight that there were tiles going the other way. As far as we were aware, there was tiles. Let me finish. There was tiles going into the main tile here that goes down into the Tate drain that takes water. We just have to assess a certain amount of area that uses that particular tile and a certain amount of flow. So it's based on the amount of flow in that tile. It's a 10-inch tile that has a specific capacity. There is surface water that would flow over top of the land and flow southwest into a different private tile that heads and leaves this property and goes through the Jones property. And so there is water that would head in two different directions, but that does not alleviate the necessity to have a drain the other direction and have a charge and an assessment and municipal drain outlet where this private tile exists. We did discuss with the landowner that they could remove the tile and have 100% of the water go to the southwest if they wished. But they were the ones that submitted the petition to have this made a municipal drain to continue to be able to outlet water into the Tate drain.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Mr. Donor, we're going to receive this report tonight, and Mike has outlined the options. If you're not pleased with the report and you want to appeal it, it's 40 days. Is that right, Mike?
That's correct.
There is 40 days to put an appeal in if you're not happy with it.
No, he's not right with his report.
Well, as I said, if you're not happy with it, you've got 40 days to put an appeal in, and it'll go to the Drainage Tribunal and they'll make a decision.
That's a question, Dave. Who does he put the appeal into? Where is that? Does he submit that to the township office, or who does he submit that appeal to?
It is at the township office, yes.
Okay, did you catch that, Peter? So if you want to submit an appeal, it goes to the township office?
Yes. And if he wants to put it in, the sooner the better.
We'll do that.
There he is. We got you now, Peter.
What do you mean? Can you hear me now?
You're on the. Yep.
Well, then we are connected now. But how is it possible? Our farm is systematically tiled and all the water runs to the southwest. There is no tile connected to the 10-inch tile from our field. How can it be possible to be in two watersheds?
Mr. Donor, Mike has already responded to that question. And if you're not happy with the report, you put an appeal in.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council? Mover and second, the quarter revision for the Tate Drain Branch E 2021 be scheduled for June 16th, 2022 at 7:30. Mover, Cerna, all in favor? Carried. And mover and second of the tenders for the construction of the Tate Drain Branch E 2021 be requested for June 9th, 2022 at 11 a.m. Daguerre, Lewis, all in favor? Carried. All right, Jeff, you're up.
Mr. Mayor, I have the April activity report there. It's basic, fairly quiet month, 27 calls, so standard for the average month. Nothing else to say except for the 15 calls in the north and 12 to the south. Just to let you know too, which isn't in this report, but the new recruit class for this year and for last year, since we weren't able to do a class last year due to COVID, has successfully finished their class. And this is the first class we've done with Elgin County as a regional training center. So as you know, the fire college had closed this year and gave opportunity to have regional training centers. Elgin County was awarded one, as we have enough training facilities throughout the municipalities. So we've done both our first recruit classes, and we're doing other classes as well through the regional training center. And both recruit classes have been finished, and both have done their provincial testing last Wednesday, and they've done their practical testing from the government on Saturday and Sunday at the Station 5. So that's 80 recruits we've done through for the County of Elgin in part of Middlesex that's involved. So it's working well with Elgin so far, and we'll hope to move on and expand it for next year. So
okay, sounds good, Jeff. Thank you. Questions for Jeff? Moving to the second report, F-2208, entitled Emergency Services Activity Report, April, be received. Jaguar, Lewis, all in favor? Matt, you're doing the next one, the petition for drainage?
Yes, good evening, Your Worship and Council. Give a second. This first report I have for you this evening relates to a drainage petition the township received by a landowner within the watershed of a new drain being considered on the north side of Lyons Line, west of Whitaker Road. Spreed Associates are already appointed to prepare an engineer's report for the new branch of the Burks drain. So staff recommend that Spreed Associates again be appointed to address this petition, as it's an extension or a connection to the new branch currently being considered. And I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Questions for Matt on this petition? Mover and second, report number PW 2230, entitled Petition for Drainage Dike Storm Petition be received. And that George Varican, professional engineer of Spreech Associate, be appointed to prepare the engineer's report for the Dike Storm petition. It being noted, the petitioner is requesting the petition be incorporated into the engineer's report currently being prepared for the construction of a new branch of the Burks drain. Moore and Cerna, all in favor? Carried. You're doing the next one on the road safety audit?
Yes, that's right. So through you, Your Worship, this second report is regarding the implementation of the Phase 2 road safety audit recommendations. It was last year in September that staff presented recommendations for guide rail locations and speed limit reductions based on the existing road geometry allowances from the Phase 2 report. At that time, Council deferred to Budget Committee as there was not adequate 2021 budget available to undertake the work. So now, having an approved 2022 budget which accommodates these recommendations, staff are bringing back a report which includes a table of contents directing to the requested maps, noting where the guide rail and speed limit reductions are recommended. Additionally, within the financial section of the report, it's noted that the guide rail recommendations are estimated to cost around $850,000. So rather than proceeding all at once, staff have proposed a multi-year plan to implement the recommendations in order not to exceed $100,000 per year. Except for the 2022 year, where the approved budget has accommodated $200,000. I can hopefully answer any questions council might have. The report is exceeding 230 pages, so we'll do my best.
All right, thanks, Mike. Questions from Matt on the road safety audit? Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Matt. Matt, I know before budget time, I brought up the college line near the Kingsmill corner. They were requesting the 60-kilometer zone near the built-up area, which makes sense because if it's on the one side, it should be on the other. And I think Springwater Road, a section there, they've been requesting too. So see, we must have bypassed it at budget time, but it was requested. So is there any movement on that or?
Through your worship. So that section was included in the phase 2 audit, and looking at the road geometry and those built up things, didn't recommend any change at that time. But noting that request, we can include that as a change order in the phase 3 audit that's being undertaken right now. So it wasn't included in this one, but it can be in the future.
What time? How much in the future? What are you talking?
So that phase 3 has commenced now. We awarded that at, I believe it was the last meeting of council. So they're started undertaking the review in the south third of the township, but we can easily add another section for further review.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Matt on the audit? Mover and second, report number PW 2235 entitled Road Safety Audit Phase 2 Implementation be received. Municipal staff be authorized and directed to take the necessary steps to ensure the appropriate speed reductions are implemented on all township roads, and the municipal staff be authorized and directed to proceed with the installation of guardrails and the identified locations as budget limitations allow. Lewis, and did you put your hand up, Chess, or are you just scratching? All right. And Galinsky, all in favor? Carried. Yeah, that's the next one. All right, the Hacienda Road and Vienna Line culverts.
And for this report, we do have George Varikin from Speed Associates with us on Zoom. He's going to present the technical report. And once George has completed his presentation and can answer any questions, I'll be happy to speak to the staff report and recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Is George there?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? I believe the host has disabled my video, so if they could turn that on, I would appreciate it.
He's there, but can we get him enlarged?
There we go. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. We're pleased to present our report on the Hacienda and Vienna Line culvert rehabilitation at Silver Creek. We undertook this project as a result of an RFP that was undertaken last year. There's two existing culverts here that are starting to fail due to age. Both culverts have deformed significantly over time and are due for replacement in the near future. They're not at immediate risk of failure. However, they will be needed to be replaced in the near future, and they are both quite expensive to replace. So as part of this RFP, we looked at both of these sites to analyze the different options that were available for either rehabilitating or replacing these culverts. Both sites are significantly deep, as the culverts are down in the bottom of the gully and the roadways have been built up significantly. So both these culverts are in the neighborhood of 40 feet deep, which could present significant construction challenges, but it also presents significant loading considerations for these culverts because they have to bear the capacity of approximately 30 feet of roadway above them. So we looked at the different options here. On both sites, we considered two rehabilitation methods and two replacement methods. The replacement methods, we looked at a steel option, which would be a lower cost option with a lower lifespan, and also a concrete replacement option, which would be a higher cost but longer lifespan. We also looked at a structural spray lining rehabilitation. However, due to the depths of these culverts, the structural spray liners needed to be extremely thick, so they got very expensive. And we also looked at the option of inserts, which would go inside the existing culverts. Both of these culverts, well, actually, let me just clarify here. The Hacienda Line culvert currently meets the hydraulic capacities required for bridge code, but the Vienna site does not. So we were not recommending that an insert be used on the Vienna site due to the fact that it would further reduce the capacity below that, which is required for bridge code. The Hacienda site an insert could be considered. However, it would be difficult to construct, and as such, there isn't a significant cost saving. So we'd certainly recommend that a replacement option would be better suited. Due to the depths, like I said, the loading conditions, and also the amount of earth required to replace these is significant. Both these culverts are approximately 50 meters long and would require a 50-meter length to be replaced, or almost 200 feet, because by the time you get from the top of the hill down to the bottom of the slope, there is a significant amount of length required. Retaining wall systems could be implemented to shorten the length. However, that wouldn't result in cost savings due to the amount of bearing capacity those retaining walls would require. So yeah, we looked at a couple options here. Everything's quite expensive. I'll just do a quick summary of each, the cost of each option. And this includes everything, including administration, net HST. There's existing utilities such as gas mains and hydro poles that would need to be supported during construction. As you can imagine, we have gas lines that are right below the roadway. And so you'd have a gas main, 30 feet up in the air that needs to be supported for the duration of construction, or decommissioned and reconstructed upon completion. So for the first site, which was Hacienda, we looked at a steel pipe replacement. It was anticipated to be approximately 1.2 million. Precast box was anticipated to be $2 million. A cast in place concrete box, which would have a longer duration of construction, but a slightly lower cost, was anticipated at 1.8 million. And then a rehabilitation with a structural spray liner would be 2 million, or a pipe insert, which we don't recommend in this situation, was anticipated at 1.3 million. On an annual cost, based on the anticipated lifespan of each of those structures, the concrete box replacement, which was cast in place, would have the lowest annual cost. However, like I said, it is certainly more expensive than a steel pipe replacement. Also, the other site is similar. I'll just quickly run through the numbers here to give an idea. And this is on the Vienna line site, which has it's an extra approximately 10 feet deeper. So it is more costly to do, and it's also a larger structure. The steel pipe replacement would be anticipated at approximately 1.4 million. The concrete box would be anticipated at approximately 2.5 million. A cast in place box at 2.2 million. A structural spray liner at 2.2 million, or a rehabilitation with a fiberglass pipe insert, which we haven't installed in our office. There certainly hasn't been many of them installed in Ontario, but it was the only thing that would have the bearing capacity at these depths to be a rehabilitation at 2.4 million. So based on this, we had some consultation with municipality to figure out kind of their budgetary constraints and anticipated timelines. And it's our opinion that probably a cast in place concrete box would be the best alternative, just because it has the lowest annual cost. Typically, the government, the federal government and the provincial government will offer granting programs that help with these sort of programs. We've certainly seen other municipalities within Elgin receive large grants towards projects similar in nature to this. Just recently, we were involved with a project in Dunn that received a grant that covered approximately 80% of the construction cost. I'm not saying that that would currently happen, or it may or may not happen on this project, but it would certainly be something we would encourage the municipality to pursue, as these are very large costs to replace. And then we would anticipate these would be replaced in the near future. Does anybody have any questions regarding the costs there or the alternatives proposed?
Thank you, George. Questions for George on either one of these replacements? It's pretty technical. I do remember when those were installed, George, in the 80s, And it was a new concept where instead of a round culvert, it was an oval culvert. And within 5 years, we ended up putting struts in because it was starting to settle. So it's been a bit of a hassle ever since they were installed, and it was a new concept. And obviously, I don't think they've put any oval culverts in since then.
Yes, structurally, oval culverts are more prone to failure, and with the depths that are present here, it certainly is not a good candidate for oval culverts. And that's why, like I said, the only insert available to rehabilitate that would be a fiberglass one, which is not something we're familiar with. So yeah, no, that is something we've seen, and you know, concrete has been tried and true, so we certainly like that option.
Okay, I agree with you. Any other comments or questions? Matt, have you anything to add?
Yes, just further to George's explanation from the technical side, the staff report does provide an implementation plan for these replacements, noting the 2022 budget accommodates the design of these structures. The staff are seeking to proceed with the RFPs for the noted long-term consideration for cast-in-place designs. Both of these culverts are Schedule A Class EAs, meaning they're good candidates to have a shell design for, to take advantage of grant programs, as George has explained, and as the Schedule A won't expire, that's pre-approved projects for the township. So they're good candidates for this, and we'd like to be proceeding with those options.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you, George.
Oh, thank you. Have a good evening.
Yep, good night now. Mover and second report number PW 2236 entitled Hacienda Road and Vienna Line Culvert Rehabilitation Consideration be received, and that staff proceed with the issuance of requests for proposals in the design of concrete box culvert for the replacement of C15 Hacienda Road and culvert, and C17 Vienna Line Culvert in accordance with the 2022 capital budget. Lewis, seconder. Galinsky, all in favor? Carried. Okay, Adam, are you there? Yep.
Yes, Dan. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So council's aware we've been working on this with the municipality of BAM for a number of months. So I've provided some background in my staff report. I will hand it over to Todd McDonald, who's the consultant the township is retained to assist with the review for potential shared development services, building, planning, and bylaw with the municipality of BAM. There is nothing further to add to my report. And like I said, Todd will walk council through his presentation. The one thing that I can add is the municipality of BAM typically has its evenings or sort of council meetings the same evenings as we do. They held a special council meeting last night so that they could have Todd present to them. They passed the resolution, which is largely the same setup as what's recommended in my report. But unless there's anything, Mr. Mayor, we can turn it over to Todd for the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Todd, can you add anything else to this presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and, members of council, I'll try and keep it crisp and move through the presentation briskly. I would encourage members of council to stop me along the way if you have factual clarification. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. I'd also like to recognize my colleague, Tony Quirk from Performance Concepts is here as well. And Tony's been instrumental in the work that we've been undertaking so far. Tony, I'm hoping that you have control of the deck here. And if so, let's move forward. Quick explanation of the methodology of the work. The RFP that Malahide issued was prescriptive and clear. This project has 3 stages. The first stage is to build out, if you will, options for how service sharing could work in the areas of planning, development approval, building services, and bylaw enforcement. We have built out some of those options. We're going to give you a quick presentation on them tonight, and we have sort of a soft recommendation of an option that appears to hold promise. After we receive direction from council to proceed with a preferred option, and BAM has already offered a preliminary suggestion in that regard as well, we'll move to the middle stage. We'll take that option, we'll do a deeper dive, and we'll get into the granular nitty-gritty, the details of how a service sharing model and framework could work. We'll come back to you with that deeper dive, granular business case in June. And then at your direction again, we will proceed to build out a potential draft legal agreement that could implement a preferred sharing model between the two municipalities. But tonight we're here to talk about some of those options. A little bit of context on the next slide, if you would, Tony. I don't have to tell Malahide anything much about service sharing. You are veterans. You're already involved in a range of service sharing agreements, some around IT, some around recreation services. You get it. You get the idea that there can be shared staffing positions. You can share specialized equipment or facilities. You can share IT tools or software platforms. You can create a borderless service area between two municipalities. You can create a special purpose body, as you have experience with. And of course, you can share contractor arrangements. All these tools are in place in various parts of Ontario. And of course, the Township of Malahide is no stranger to these kinds of arrangements. Next slide, Tony. As you, again, as an experienced municipality in the service sharing world already understand, that any successful sharing agreement has to benefit, or has to balance rather, the benefits received by the parties, in this case, BAM and Malahide, with an equitable cost allocation burden. When we get the benefits matching the costs, we can create win-win situations for both municipalities. And we also have to acknowledge, strategically, the reality, and it's a natural reality, of the politics of control versus results. In any service sharing arrangement, it should be perfectly clear who is calling the shots. And so therefore, there has to be a documented process setting out roles and responsibilities. And we need to make sure there is say for pay. If you're paying, we need to ensure that your interests are properly reflected, mitigating any anxiety over control. And we do that again with formal agreements and formal accountability mechanisms sort of baked into the cake, as you will, that the details of a service sharing arrangement address the politics of control. Thanks, Tony. So we, of course, we've done a lot of background research. We've spoken extensively with staff in both municipalities. We've got a couple of these as-is sort of photo snapshots, if you will, of how service works now across building, bylaw, and planning. As you know, in Malahide, you have an accredited CBO. A portion of that CBO is also deployed to oversee bylaw enforcement. In the contractor world, we have a registered code agency, RSM Building Consultants, that support the CBO in the execution of building services. Service levels in the building service world, as you know, are driven by legislated timeframes in the Ontario Building Code Act, timeframes around permit decisions and around scheduling of inspections. And Malahide is in the forefront of municipalities that are using portal and workflow tools like Cloud Permit to ensure that you're operating in an efficient fashion and that you can report on results from an accountability point of view. The tool isn't necessarily deployed and used by every applicant, but it is there and it's available for every applicant in order to provide customer service convenience. And then, of course, the financial model is a function of legislated permit fees and your building reserve. As I mentioned, in bylaw world, a portion of bylaw enforcement is done off the corner of the desk, if you will, of the CBO. and about 15% of CBO capacity is spent trying to oversee bylaw. MEU Consulting, your billable hours based bylaw enforcement contractor, is utilized on an as needed basis, file by file. We would note, and based on our research and widespread understanding, MEU, of course, has multiple municipal clients across portions of Ontario. They are experiencing frequent staff turnover, and there are legitimate questions longer term, I think, about service delivery continuity and stability in a firm that is working sort of that close to their margin. In terms of service levels, bylaw, as you know, it's a complaint-driven service level. At this time, there aren't meaningful performance tracking or indicators in place in Malahide in terms of being able to comment on closure rates. The CBO's point to us in this regard is it's a question of workload and busyness, and this is an area for performance improvement moving forward, where we could be moving forward in the shared service model towards reporting on actual service results and adding additional focus to our oversight in management of the bylaw enforcement service channel. And of course, as you know, bylaw enforcement services are primarily property tax supported. There's rare and occasional enforcement revenues perhaps, but they're not really part of the base funding model for the service. And then in the planning development services world, sort of a secondary level of priority, with the key priorities being in building and bylaw. Of course, we have a currently vacant development services coordinator position. A vacant director / manager's position. The development services coordinator is firmly in place. It is in the room. You have the benefit of using Monteith Brown to provide you with planning, consulting, contractor services as required, again, on a billable hour basis. There isn't a sort of contracted go-to development engineering contractor at this point in time. That's a potential benefit moving forward in the shared services model to designate a go-to contractor. Service levels, of course, there are real challenges around service levels with Bill 108 and Bill 109 driving very ambitious decision timing challenges. In the medium term, there is the potential of serviced greenfield housing demand in Springfield. This was an issue that's been dealt with in our previous 2021 modernization review and in the Watson DC background study. And the cloud permitting system that is being used in building world has not yet been deployed for planning approvals world, but there's nothing stopping that from happening going forward. And a particular point that we were impressed with in terms of managing the risk of Bill 109 is that the majority of planning effort is paid for through your deposit system. These deposit drawdowns where the billable hour effort of Monteith Brown and others can be passed on directly to the applicant, ensuring 100% recovery of contractor effort. So that is the Malahide snapshot that we have considered moving forward. Of course, there's a similar snapshot for our friends and colleagues in BAM. BAM currently does not have an accredited building staff. They have retained a contractor, a CBO, a contracted CBO for 3 days a week. And that contractor is paid again on a fixed allotment of billable hours. Legislative timeframes are the same, of course, that you face. They do not have a cloud permit type workflow tool. They are certainly interested in securing the benefits of one. They have a significant level of low-tech applicant support, so they may have 2 channels of delivery moving forward. And like you, permit fees and building reserve balances are the funding model for building. In bylaw, again, like you, they have a member of their management team sort of managing bylaw off the corner of his desk, the fire chief, who estimates about 30% of his time is overseeing bylaw. MEU Consulting, there they are again, the same firm, billable hour basis as we discussed. and some of the same concerns around service continuity. Like you, complaint-driven service level, they have an improved performance tracking capability that they have in place where they are able to report on closure rates and timeframes for dealing with complaints. That's certainly competencies that could be leveraged moving forward. They are property tax supported. Like you, they have an in-house development services coordinator who creates the input channel for the public to come and deal with applications in planning world. As you use Monteith Brown, they use IBI on that same billable hour basis. BAM has been using CJDL engineering for some kinds of projects, but they're not very helpful in development approvals world because currently the two BAM subdivisions working their way through the process, CJDL are representing the applicants. So of course they can't be doing the engineering review work for BAM. So they, like Malahide, will need to sort of tap an ongoing development engineering firm to help them with future development work. They have the same exposure to Bill 109 and Planning Act legislation. As we mentioned, there's somewhere between 600 and 800 units of subdivision-driven development that's going to be moving forward, their version of the Springfield opportunity. And like Malahide, strong similarity, they use the deposit drawdown approach to pay for most of this work. So the two as-is service snapshots, there are some important differences where the two municipalities could benefit from each other, but the service delivery models are very similar, which again augurs well for service sharing. So there's a number of factors that have influenced our design of some of these options. As we mentioned, the corner of the desk issue, which is negatively impacting the capacity of building services to focus on building staff to focus on building services in Malahide, and on fire staff to focus on fire services in BAM. An overarching reality is that finding accredited building staff is exceedingly difficult in this seller's market. We're not going to be able to magically invent building capacity, nor is either side going to be in a position to easily obtain additional building capacity. But working together in a shared service arrangement, there will be the ability to combine capacity and meet mutual need. We also note that your contractor-driven planning model is really effective in mitigating the sort of clawback of fees that Bill 109 has introduced. And that's because of your deposit drawdown system. We don't think there's any difficulty in making the case that your deposit drawdowns could be easily linked to the Municipal Act rather than the Planning Act, and that you can protect yourself from fee risk. And so that consultant model is certainly worth continuing, even above and beyond the fact that you get good value from those two consulting firms. We also are strongly in favor, and we like the idea of the existing municipal staff who can provide the customer service access point for planning matters in both Malahide and BAM. And we certainly need to preserve that building and planning access point in the two offices when we consider service sharing. So, you know, it's a non-starter to expect applicants from Malahide to go to BAM or from applicants from BAM to travel to Malahide. Those access points need to be preserved. And again, the key here, we think, is entering into service sharing, not necessarily to shed resources, that's not feasible, nor necessarily even to reduce costs. It's to get good cost-effective value from securing stable resource and capacity moving forward. Service sharing in this labor market is all about continuity of services. We have some flexible opportunities to redeploy and reallocate some of our contractor resources, but the fixed costs in each municipality realistically are not going anywhere. The staff you have are valued and competent, and we need them moving forward. If securing adequate labor capacity is the urgent issue that's generating service sharing, we would also note that some of the other aspects of governance, such as special purpose boards, et cetera, those can be phased in over the medium term once the early term of the deals if I can put it that way, address the issue of scarce resource and capacity. So let's line up the combined staffing muscle first, and then we can phase our way into some of these other more complex or nuanced issues around governance. So with those ideas in mind, we would certainly note that moving forward into the detailed agreement design, model design, we're going to need to address service delivery mechanisms. There's really only three: you buy, you sell, or you share. There are governance options. We don't necessarily need a shared services board, but we can move to one. We can also, of course, secure, in a more modest sense, purchase service agreements, and a combination of those certainly going forward are possible. Resourcing, it's either internal staff or it's contracted service hours, or it's a blend of the two. Cost recovery tools, property taxes, of course, development fees or deposit drawdowns, even more promisingly, and of course, building permit revenues are all part of the model. And then in terms of service levels, some of these service levels are a done deal. They're already regulated by the province. Building comes to mind. Council can mandate service levels, as you already do in areas like bylaw through your enforcement bylaws. We can also, of course, build contractual obligations in so that buyers of service know that they will receive a certain contractual level of service from the seller. And of course, we can also establish shared customer service levels through harmonization. So all of those pieces will be, will address all of these questions in an eventual detailed service sharing model. Thanks, Tony.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor?
I say, is there anything else? We just had a gap.
Oh, I'm assuming we're okay.
Yep.
So in planning, we've developed basically three options: a shared model, a model where Malahide could sell planning services, or a model where BAM sells. And of course, with either a shared services board or a purchase agreement, combination of staff and contractors using the deposit drawdown model and meeting both legislated and purchase service standards. That's planning. In building, or bylaw, whichever comes next, Tony, thanks. In building, again, we could, either party could buy or sell, or we could share. Governance could be through a board. Harmonized building bylaws are probably necessary so that the shared staff are enforcing the same bylaws across both municipalities. Again, we can use the existing blend of accredited staff, such as Malahide CBO, and accredited contractors, such as BAM's 3-day-a-week registered code agency CBO. We can develop common permit fee schedules, and we can, of course, ensure that both municipalities continue to hit legislated service standards. And then in enforcement, the next slide, Tony. Again, we can buy, sell, or share. Harmonized bylaws and a shared services board or a purchase service agreement model are possible. Again, we want to use a combination of staff and contractors, funded by property taxes for the most part, and a council mandated service level that would be embedded in the shared service agreement. In terms of the evaluation, when it comes to building, the strengths of the various options are set out here. Bottom line is all three options could be viable moving forward. The key driver here, of course, is that a Malahide sells option would already have the logical platform advantages of the cloud permit platform. And of course, Malahide already has embedded staff. All that would be required there would be the redeployment and potential expansion of the BAM contracted resource that could be transferred to Malahide, and Malahide would oversee that service in theory. On to the next, Tony, thanks. In this case, a new bylaw enforcement officer is the basis of the buy-sell relationship. And of course, this would be equally viable in some respects in either Malahide, with either Malahide or BAM selling. In either case, there would be a reduced need for contractor billable hours. And of course, there would need to be 50-50 sharing of the FTE, at least 50-50 until the end of each year, when we could look at what the actual usage patterns were and make end of year adjustments. Certainly in the BAM cell option, we would have the advantage of BAM's already advanced ability to do performance reporting. In a BAM cell option, both BAM's fire chief and Malahide's CBO would be relieved of their corner of the desk burden and would be able to refocus their efforts on both building and fire services respectively. And so this is a viable option to consider as well. And then finally, in the last option in planning, the shared delivery option would allow both municipalities to retain their internal planning techs, those gateways, if you will, into each municipality for the public. We would be able to retain the competencies of both Monteith Brown and IBI on the consulting side of the ledger. They could cover for each other in cases where we needed additional support. There would certainly be an opportunity to secure a new shared development engineering contractor to complement Monteith Brown and IBI. And of course, both municipalities could benefit from leveraging cloud permit. So all of these evaluations, Council, lead us to this next slide, which is sort of the culmination of our work. We think there is a working model that is worthy of your consideration. And this is a model that we reviewed with BAM's council last night. And this is the model that your CAO has put forward from staff's perspective as a viable working model as well. And in this model, essentially, we would have Malahide selling building services to BAM. So Malahide would leverage your current full-time employee, who is building accredited, of course, would take over BAM's existing 3-day-a-week, very experienced and savvy building contractor, potentially expanding to 5 days a week in this pooled model, given the upload, given the impending and uptick in volume of activity that's coming. And of course, there would be no erosion of building services capacity due to the off the corner enforcement of bylaw. Excuse me, pardon me. In this model, we would have a shared planning model where each municipality would retain its intake staff. Each municipality would excuse me, sorry, Council, fighting off a bit of cold. Each municipality would retain its existing contractor resources, Monteith Brown IBI, at least for now, pending any future RFP. We would have a phased harmonization of your development approvals processes to reflect the new greenfield subdivision development that's coming at you. And we would retain the deposit drawdown models for paying for your development approvals work. And of course, there would be a shared implementation and usage of the cloud permit workflow tool that Malahide already brings to the party. And then finally, we would recommend BAM selling, no, didn't talk about, yeah, one back, thanks, Tony. We didn't talk about BAM selling to Malahide when it comes to bylaw. BAM would retain an FTE, a new bylaw enforcement officer, the cost of which would be provisionally shared 50-50, with the potential at the end of year of adjustments reflecting docketed workload during the year, and also featuring a phased harmonization of bylaws. This would address this all important strategic issue of balancing control, the politics of control. BAM would not be exclusively a price taker. They would also be a price setter. Malahide would balance Malahide selling to BAM, BAM selling to Malahide, and having a shared development service around planning in the model as well. So we think this makes strategic sense. We think it builds on the respective strengths of both municipalities and will deliver a significant level of service delivery continuity with shared resourcing costs for both municipalities. We think this is the basis for the next stage of the work, which we set out in our final slide here. Once we have sort of provisional approval to go forward from both councils, we will then do the deep dive, granular, detailed business case work to bring all the nitty-gritty details and decision points back to each council on the details of this sort of arrangement in principle that we're talking about tonight. And so you're not making hard and fast decisions tonight. You're putting down the drawbridge and allowing us to move forward into the stage to build out, and we will be coming back to you with the results of that in June. And with that, I will blessedly be quiet and allow members of council to discuss among yourselves the virtues of what you've heard, and we can also provide any clarifying comments and answer any questions. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Todd and Tony, for the report. And certainly, as you stated, we have a long history of sharing services, not only with our lower tier, but with our upper tier in Elgin County. And it's provided a lot of efficiencies over the years. So certainly this is not new to us. And at first blush, I certainly agree with everything you've stated. I'm hoping council will move forward tonight and we can make a final decision once we get all the nitty gritty down, and as well as having BAM on side as well. So certainly we've had a long history with BAM working together, and I'm certain this will work out as well. Any questions for either Todd or Tony or Adam on this proposal? Jess?
Mayor Manel, just one question concerning the CBO. I was under the impression that our CBO is now completely booked full-time, so that really doesn't have any time to donate 3 days. So where would those 3 days that are supposed to go to BAM come from if our CBO was already busy full-time?
Adam, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Galinsky, certainly our CBO is certainly booked. We're leveraging RSM building consultants and also the shared agreements that the CBOs in Elgin County have with regards to covering for vacation. So yes, where this benefit would allow, and the details will be worked out through the next phase of Todd and Tony's work, would be that there would be one, like each municipality is required to appoint a CBO. So in this case, Malahide and BAM are both small rural municipalities. We share that opportunity to have share one CBO, and then we would, in the next phase, there would hopefully be a recruitment for an inspector. So we would be sharing, instead of having 2 CBOs in each municipality, we would have 1 CBO, and then the staff required, whether it's 1 inspector or however it works out, in addition to our CBO. I hope that answers your question.
Certainly in the work that we've done to date, consistent with what your CAO has mentioned, members of council, we would be essentially pooling the existing resources for building services, and so that BAM's 3-day-a-week contractor CAO would continue to be an available resource on day 1 of service sharing moving forward. We've discussed in principle the idea with BAM that contract could be shifted and overseen by Malahide as the provider of building services for both municipalities. You would then be able to make decisions together about whether to continue that day 1 model or opt for an opportunity to try and staff it in a different way with a full-time position, or with a potential expansion of the BAM contractor to 5 days a week. So there are a number of options you would be able to consider. But to the councillor's point, there wouldn't be a net reduction in resources. So your CBO resources would be intact. Their CBO resources contracted would be put into the mix master as well, at least on day one. And so there'd be, they'd be able to provide coverage for each other. They'd be able to work together. They wouldn't be limited to one geography or the other. And that team could evolve moving forward under the guidance of the two municipalities.
Jess?
Mayor Manel, just one further question. How many new staff would be involved in this model that we're looking at between BAM and Malahide?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the preliminary work that we have done to date suggests that the one new staff FTE would be the new bylaw enforcement officer. Of course, that would be shared, only half of the burden each, between each of the municipalities, and it would relieve your current CBO from his double duty off the corner of the desk overseeing bylaw enforcement. It would do the same for BAM, relieving their fire chief from doing double duty. And it would conceivably result in a reduction in the number of billable hours, a significant reduction in the number of billable hours both municipalities would need to buy from the MEU bylaw enforcement contractor. In the second stage of the work, we will be doing, the more complicated billable hour arithmetic on what the net financial impact is of, half of a new FTE minus the plus factoring in the reduction in contractor billable hours, factoring in the benefit in terms of the number of hours sort of repatriated by building for you and by fire for BAM. And we'll bring you back what that net impact would be in the second stage.
Okay, another check, Jess?
Mayor Manel, correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am. The bylaw enforcement, BAM, they hire that out to a separate firm, do they not?
Adam? Or Tony?
I'm happy to, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, I was just getting myself unmuted there. Through you, Worship, Councillor Galinsky, yes, and this was stated in the both as-is slides that Todd provided. BAM utilizes MEU Consulting, the same bylaw enforcement firm that we use.
Any other questions? And keep in mind, this is basically the draft. This is going to take some time before we get the final ones, and questions like you have, Chess, on personnel and how many full-time equivalent it's going to be is going to come down the road. So we don't have to make that decision tonight. Tonight, we're just looking at, do we want to move forward with the shared services with BAM? Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, the higher levels, what's the ultimate benefit for our residents? So we talked about efficiencies, but is there also a tangible impact that our constituents would see out of this arrangement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. Yes, Deputy, I think the primary benefit is we would be securing the necessary resources and capacity to consistently deliver services that meet the expectations of the community. It's been made quite clear, for instance, in the area of bylaw enforcement services, that the contractor resources, independent of focused oversight, they're being deployed against complaint-driven cases, but they aren't necessarily closing them to the satisfaction of residents. And we think that the additional focus of a trained, dedicated bylaw enforcement officer will improve consistency of service. So it's not to save money as much as it is to build consistent capacity to generate results. And the reason we need to share is because the labor market is so constrained and the economies of securing those services individually just don't make economic sense.
Great, thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments for any of the staff or Todd or Tony? Okay. As I said before, this is just the first step, and this is the draft, and basically we're going to decide tonight whether we want to move forward or not, and certainly I think we need to move forward with the next steps. So moving to the second report, number CAO 2207, entitled Presentation Number 1 regarding sharing development approval services, business plan, and electronic processing we received. The council support and give direction to the Performance Concept Inc. and the staff to proceed with a detailed build out of a preferred model subject to the council for the municipality of Bayham agreeing whereby the township of Malahide sells building services to the municipality of Bayham. Municipality of Bayham sells bylaw enforcement services to Malahide, and a shared service board is established for land use planning services between both municipalities. Winder and Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good night. Reports of outside boards. We have one from the Long Point. Any questions or comments? Mover and seconder, the Long Point Regional Conservation Authority Board of Directors minutes of May 4th be received. Whitner, or sorry, Moore and Cerna, all in favor? Carried. Items of correspondence. There's 9 items. Anyone wish to make comment? Question mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Probably through to your fire chief, but number 2, Tay Valley Township. It seems like they're going to be tweaking against some of the regulations, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, Jeff, but looks like they're going to make the training and the rules more onerous on top of what we already have, and whether there should be some pushback to this or not. Just wanted your opinion on it. Number 2, Tay Valley Township.
This is in regard to firefighter certification.
Yeah, so the firefighter certification, the Ontario province of Ontario is the province of Ontario just putting it in July, training certification for all firefighters. So if Tay's pushing back, there's a reason for it, because they probably have not been following up, staying current with the training. Our township is actually, and I'm working on doing a report now, very up to date on our training. So the requirements they've put in place is a 4-year program for firefighter certification, and then 6 years for our technical rescue. That's going through the whole province. This was put into effect. This tried to go through provincial government several years ago, and it was repealed. And it's put back in, and it's going in July now. Our township ourselves is in pretty good position, as we've been training our firefighters since 2010, 2011 to a standard already close by. So our training gap is a lot shorter than most municipalities. So we're in pretty good shape ourselves, but there's some municipalities that have not been certifying their firefighters or doing any registered training. And that's going to affect them greatly on their, because they'll have 4 years to comply. So.
Okay, thank you. That helps explain it.
So you would be supporting this then, Jeff?
Were they asking for?
No. No, I'm saying you're supporting the certification.
Yes, the certification's well for safety of firefighters and for municipalities to make sure they have trained personnel in place. So,
okay. Yeah, it's going to be difficult for smaller municipalities to do this because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone wants to make comment on? None. Following a correspondence we noted and filed 1 through 9. Winder and Cerna, all in favor? There was a request from Malahide Fighters Association that they want to do fireworks at the pier in Port Bruce. The comments, I know they did it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Anyway, it was very successful.
They did do it last year in September long weekend as well.
Was it last year?
Yep, and they did it I think 2 years before that.
Anyway, very successful. I know they passed the hat and it was well received. So certainly I would support this, and I suggest that the council support it as well. Mover and second, Malahide Volunteer Fire Association be granted permission to utilize a portion of the pier in Port Bruce for the purpose of a firework display on May 22nd or May 23rd, subject to providing township with proof of event liability insurance, naming the township of Malahide as additional insured. Cerna and Glinski, all in favor? Carried. Anything else under other business, Allison?
Yes, through you, worship, the township has received a request from Central Elgin for an appointee to attend the Court of Revision meeting on May 24th at 6:45 p.m. via Zoom for the Barron's Drain in the municipality of Central Elgin, which the township has assessed lands contributing to at the northwest corner of the township bordering Belmont and adjacent to County Road 74. So we have a resolution for a Malahide counselor to sit on that Court of Revision.
And Dominique has volunteered for that. And so mover and seconder that Dominique be appointed as the Township of Malahide Court of Revision member for the Barron's Drain Branch A and E municipality of Central Elgin. Cerna and Moore, all in favor? Carried. I know that's in yours, Mark, but you would have to declare a conflict, so that's why we moved on. Anything else, Scott? You had something under other business?
Yeah, I'd just like to share with council. I got a phone call this week from Andy Verhage. It's been the first time the Talbot Trail ATV Club that we allow to run on our roads here in Malahide. It's the first time in 2 years they've been able to get together and they do a run where they pick up all the garbage along any part of the roadway that they run along. And he said it went very successful. They got a large dumpster, pretty much filled it. And that was just sort of their way of saying thank you to Malahide Township for letting them use the roads for what trail access they need. So he said, and he threw in that they got a nice couch and a reclining chair also.
Well, I think, Allison, we should send them a letter in appreciation of what they do. And certainly I have never had one complaint about those ATV clubs. They're very responsible and they really look after things. So we'll send them a letter in appreciation.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Anything else under other business? Donnie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of requests. Continue to work on community safety and speeding. That's a kind of a monthly request. So the latest two, so one in Springfield on Ron McNeil, there's a suggestion to move the speed limit signage a little further west so that maybe, hopefully, people can continue to respect the 50 zone a little bit longer, like to the official end of the village. So few residents have suggested that. They talked to OPP, who also recommended that would be a good idea. So I'd like to request that this council ask the county to move the signage further to officially extend the 50 zone.
Okay, Matt, what's the process? Do we go through you to send that on to the county?
That's correct. Being a county road, the county council does require a township resolution. So the clerk can prepare a resolution accordingly to extend that zone or make that request to extend the zone beyond the built up area.
Okay. Allison has just magically supported this. So the mover and seconder of the Township of Malahide Council requests the Elgin County Council conduct speed and traffic counts on Ron McNeil line at the West Village limit in support of extending the 50-kilometer speed limit westly beyond the build-up area and residential area. Jair and Moore, all in favor? Do the second one.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So the next request is another suggestion we received from residents, and this one is in Port Bruce, at the south end of Imperial, where the curve is, the bend coming in to the beach. So on the north end, the way usually cars are parked, it completely encroaches on the shoulder, which then pushes the pedestrians onto the road. There's no room. There's a stone wall now, and the cars are parked on the shoulder. So for that, there's a stretch around the bend that has a major blind spot, and plus pushes pedestrians on the road. So I'm wondering if our staff could do it's a county road, but if township staff could have a look first to maybe do some measurements and to see how many parking spots we could remove. Like my suggestion would be to remove parking for around that bend, if possible. And if our township staff see that that would be a viable possibility, then we could move the request to the county.
Okay. There is a motion. The Township Council directs staff to review the site distances and no parking considerations on Imperial Road at the northbound curve west of the Port Bruce Provincial Park Beach. Is that good? Okay. Mover and seconder. Lewis and Jager, all in favor? Carried. Anything else under other business? No closed, right? Mover and seconder, bylaw number 22-37 being confirmatory bylaw, given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed. With Serna and Lewis, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Mover and seconder, council adjourn its meeting at 8:52. To meet again on June 2nd at 7:30. Glinski and Winter, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.